In today's video from Demystifying Proposals, we're going to talk about some proposal development topics 201. Taking proposal management to the next level will make you even better at your job. In this section, we're going to talk about proposal outlines, which is the proposal manager's job number one, because our job number one is compliance, and the proposal outlines drive compliance. If you've watched other videos from Demystifying Proposals, you've likely seen this same slide. It's in a lot of our videos because it's one of the most important concepts. Building the proposal outline and building the compliance matrix is the most important job of the proposal manager, particularly early on, but then again at the end when you have to double check that you're still being compliant. So you want to structure your outline and compliance matrix, starting with section L, and then filter in section M, and then add section C, which is identifying the work to be done in the performance work statement or the statement of work. And you want to fold all those things in together into your outline. Be sure to include any discrepancies between section L and M. If there's something in L that's not in M, it still has to be there. If there's something in M that's not in L, it still has to be there. Then be sure to look in check section H for key personnel requirements. Sometimes they don't publish that information in section C, so don't make the mistake of not checking section H, which might have some differences in your key personnel requirements. And then the other place to look for requirements is in section B. Section B is where the CLIN structure is listed, and there may be something there that drives an aspect of your outline or compliance matrix. So you need to make sure that you look at that section as well. Some people develop their compliance matrix in Excel. Some people develop it in Word. It's really up to you. But the idea here is to put the proposal instructions, the section L requirements, next to the section M requirements so that you can do a comparison of what the requirements in section L are, what the requirements in section M are, and note any differences, particularly if there's something in L that's not in M or something that's in M that's not in L. So you want to sort of line up the columns side by side. If you're using Excel or Word table, you can do it either way. The other thing that you want to include in the compliance matrix that you don't include in your outline is the proposal instructions. So what's the font size? What are the number of page restrictions? All of those kinds of things that are the proposal instructions go in your compliance matrix. They'll go in your outline too, but usually as parenthetical information, like the technical approach is limited to 25 pages. You'll put that at the top of your outline. But here, you're giving guidance to the reviewers when they use your compliance matrix. You're also double checking yourself. So that way you have a concise list of what your proposal instructions are at the beginning of your compliance matrix. Then break down section C. That includes each of the tasks that you're required to achieve, but you also might want to include the deliverables against those tasks. So you may have deliverables that apply to the first task or the second task, and you want to be sure in your proposal to address those deliverables. So sometimes, again, you put the section C requirements in one column and the deliverables that go with those section C requirements in the second column. Just a good way to double check that you're covering everything you need to cover in your compliance matrix and then in your proposal outline itself, and then eventually in your proposal. You want to check your proposal outline against your compliance matrix. If you've done it right, the table of contents for the outline should map to your compliance matrix with the notations in the headings. So one of the things we always advise is in your outline, you put in the headings in parenthetical, or I usually use brackets, the section L and M and C requirements that particular heading is meant to address. This is guidance for not only the evaluators, but also for any reviewers that are using, that are reading your proposal. That way they know what that section is meant to respond to from the instructions and the procurement itself. So if you do that, when you make your table of contents in your outline, it should line up really nicely with your compliance matrix in terms of the L and the M and the C references. You want to make any adjustments as required before sharing the outline. So one of the things that we definitely advise is to do your compliance matrix early in the process, along with your outline, and then check your outline against your compliance matrix, check your compliance matrix against your outline. And that way you're more likely to catch anything that you may have missed in one or the other. However, it's often a good idea to have someone else check your outline and compliance matrix to make sure you've caught everything. After all, we're only human. Not all proposals will have something called Section L and M and C. That's sort of the shorthand that you'll hear proposal teams use, or business development folks in general tend to use that language, even though some customers use their own numbering structure and their own naming convention. DHS does this, for example. They number their RFPs instead of using letters. There is always something called proposal instructions or instructions to offers or something along those lines. It includes the instructions for fonts, the number of pages, who to submit to, when the proposal needs to be submitted. All of that information is what we call the proposal instructions. And then there's always something that tells you how the proposal will be evaluated, whether that's tables of excellent, very good, good, poor, and unacceptable, or very relevant, relevant, somewhat relevant, or not relevant. That's the equivalent of what we call Section M in our business development shorthand. RFPs usually include a section telling you the work the government is asking you to do. That may be in its own document. Often it's in its own document. Sometimes it's part of the RFP document itself, but sometimes it's its own attachment. And that's the statement of work or the performance work statement or the statement of objectives or whatever it is that the government is telling you what they want you to do for this procurement. For IDIQs, sometimes that's only very high level information, but it still needs to be addressed. So job number 2 for proposal managers is good proposal writing. But what does that mean? Hopefully these slides will give you some guidance on that. So the proposal manager, along with the capture manager and the solution architect, should be reviewing the content that's being written for the proposal constantly. It's very important not only that the proposal manager do this, but I'll emphasize also that the capture manager and the solution architect should be reviewing the content as well. You want to check that the authors are writing at all. Sometimes an author hasn't gotten to writing, and sometimes that deadline for the next review, pink team or red team, is looming. Then you may have to follow up with that author, find out why they're not writing, find out what's going on, that there's a blockage. So it's important to check that the authors are writing at all. It's important to check that the content the authors are writing or reusing marries to the RFP requirements. That's particularly important for reuse, right? If you're reusing content from another proposal, the chances are that that content is not necessarily 100% copyable from one proposal to another proposal without some changes. So you need to make sure that the content the authors are providing is responsive to the RFP requirements. You want to check that the authors are including the win themes. So one of the things that you want to see is maybe some call out boxes with your win themes in them. Or you want to see that they're using proof points. Those are very important things in proposal development. They're your selling points. They're your why us that you want to provide to the government. If you don't include your win themes and you don't include your proof points and you just include a simple solution, you're probably not going to win. So that's very, very important that they address both of those things. And then it's important to recognize that these edicts apply to all sections of the proposal, not just the technical approach. They'll apply to past performance, they'll apply to resumes, they'll apply even to the cost volume. You want to make sure that you have win themes and proof points and all of those things, and tailoring that content to the RFP requirements. All of those things apply to all sections of the proposal. And while these jobs also belong to the quote unquote book boss, assuming that you have somebody who's a book boss, they are also part of the proposal manager's responsibility. One of the other things the proposal manager needs to be aware of and organizing is the partners in content development. So maybe you have an editor, you need to make sure that they're standing by and they need to understand what matters for one voice. What's the tone of the RFP? What are the RFP terms that you want them to be sure to use? What are the win themes? And they may help you strengthen the win themes in particular sections. So you need to make sure that you have an editor who's aware of all of those things and standing by for the timeline when you're going to need them. You want to make sure you have a desktop publishing expert standing by to ensure that the look and feel is consistent across the proposal. So you want to make sure the desktop publisher understands the requirements of the proposal, RFP, fonts, what is the page count restrictions, all of those things the desktop publisher needs to be aware of, and you need to double check that they know and that they're doing it correctly. Same applies for a graphic artist. Graphic artists can be a godsend on a proposal. A graphic can tell up, the old adage of a picture is worth 1,000 words can really apply. But that means that the graphic artist has to understand the win themes, the RFP terms, the font restrictions, and then be able to tell the story of a graphic in as concise a way as possible and also in a way that the government can really understand what you're trying to convey with that graphic. One of your jobs as the proposal manager is to coach the authors on what's going to happen during the review and about their writing in particular, particularly if you have authors who are not used to doing proposals. They may get defensive about their writing, and it's really important that they understand that that's not what we're all about here. It's the reviewer's job to question everything. It's the reviewer's job to behave like government evaluators. So you might want to review with your authors about how the government evaluates proposals, strengths, weaknesses, and deficiencies, and what those terms mean for the evaluators. And then remember that the evaluators are going to get many, many proposals. And so they're looking for excuses and negatives to make their job easier. The faster they can throw out a proposal, the fewer proposals they have to read. So that's why you harp on compliance. It's the first thing that the evaluators will check. And non-compliant proposals are not read any further. This is why you have everything in the same order as sections L and M. You want to make it really easy for the evaluators to find the information they're looking for. And this is why you use call-out boxes and other things that draw their attention to the things that are really important for them to remember about your proposal. You want your call-out boxes to be things that they can copy into their evaluation forms as a strength and not as a weakness or a deficiency. Again, depending on how sophisticated your proposal writers are, you may need to talk to them about how Proposals 101 is just different from any other writing. It's sort of like program reporting in that you provide specific information that the government is asking for. But in this case, you also need to be compliant and compelling. So program reporting tends to be pretty straightforward, except for when it comes to like CPARs or something like that. That you might need to be compelling about. So think about that when you're talking about proposal writing, because you need to be selling, right? You need to be selling the company. And then you need to be compliant. That's really the number one thing. Because, like I said on the previous slide, if they review your proposal and it's non compliant, they're not going to read the words on the page. You could have the most compelling proposal in the world, it won't make any difference. Proposals can be also sort of like writing a term paper, except for that you're very limited in how much you can say and how much space you have to say it. There are very determined page limits in a proposal, and there are never as many pages as you want or need to say what you need to say. So you need to learn how to be very concise, but not lose the compliant or compelling elements. And then proposals is probably closest to marketing, except for that you have to be sure to use the RFP's language and follow the statement of work. And you need to be able to prove what you're saying is true. So now we're going to break down compliance and compelling into more details. So compliance means that you answer the request for a proposal or the RFP requirements using the proposal outline structured in the order of Section L, the proposal instructions, Section M, the evaluation criteria, and then Section C, the statement of work or the performance of work statement. So that it's easy, like I said before, for the government to do their evaluation. So if the customer initially asked you to give A, B, and C, then you should give the customer A, B, and C. No more, no less, no substitutions. So for example, not A and B, and we think the customer really meant D, so we're going to substitute D for C. No. Not A, we can kind of only do sort of B, so let's offer E as well to sweeten the deal, and then C. No. Not A, B, C, and Q because we think it'll make the customer happy. No. Nor any other weird letter combination or permutations other than A, B, and C. That's compliance. Compelling means you persuade the customer to select your company to perform the work over all the other competitors. And you do this with good writing and graphics. And good writing means that you answer the specific RFP requirements, but then also that you defend your claims with supporting proof or evidence, which we're going to talk about on the next slide. When it comes to proof points, you want to clearly state the claim of what you're trying to prove. Then include evidence or compelling proof. Ideally, it's quantified. Numbers are always good, so that you provide facts, statistics, customer accolades, awards, quality performance targets that you met. A good place to get some of this information is CPARS because CPARS can be really good at having all of those details about how you met the requirements on a particular project. So that's a good place to mine for that information. If your company does customer satisfaction surveys, that's another place you can mine for the information. If your company does program management reviews that are usually in an internal process that you might do on a monthly basis to double check that the programs are running the way they should, often program managers will provide details about the good things that their program did for the customer in those program management reviews. So again, that might be a gold mine for places to find good proof points. Award fee debriefs is another place to find proof points because in order to justify your award fee, you have to justify that you did really good work, not just the work that you were asked to do, but even better than that. And so there might be some good proof points in that. Using multiple types of evidence lends credibility to your claim and is much more compelling than those who only use past performance proof points. So be sure to think about CPARs, customer satisfaction surveys, program management reviews, award fee debriefs, and other things to provide more why us information in your proof points. And then you want to draw attention to your proof points, perhaps with formatting. Sometimes it's call out boxes, sometimes it's bolding. Sometimes if you have space in a proposal and it's not against the rules of the proposal, you can use icons. So maybe you create a set of icons for a particular past performance that you're using as proof points consistently. And then you use that icon consistently throughout your proposal. Or sometimes you just have an icon that is, hey, this is a proof point over here, government, this is a proof point. So think about that kind of thing if you have the space and again, if it's not against the proposal instructions. The proposal manager's job number 3 is directing color team reviews. Again, some of this information is duplicative to other demystifying proposals videos, but we're repeating it here because this is our proposal management 201, and it has more details in some places about how you direct color team reviews. Be sure to send out your invitations well in advance of when you need the reviewers, preferably shortly after the kickoff meeting. Be sure to invite enough reviewers so that no one reviewer has to review more than about 10 to 15 pages. Remember, these people have day jobs and they're doing this on their extra time. Sometimes they're doing it after hours. Sometimes they're doing it on their lunch hour. Sometimes they're trying to squeeze it in between other things. So you need to make sure that you're not giving a reviewer too much to review. You also want to be sure to invite enough reviewers so that each section is reviewed by at least 3 people. If your company is smaller, sometimes you can get away with just 2, but it's a really bad idea to have a section reviewed by only one person because one person may not see all of the details or see all of the things that need to be better. So I recommend at least 3 people if you can get away with it. Be sure to check with the reviewers that they have time to do the review. Don't assume that they accepted your invite and that means they have time. Talk to them, confirm with them. Sometimes recommended is to send out an invitation or an email to the reviewers and confirm that they have time even before you send them the meeting invite. That can be a best practice. Be sure to include the timeline for the review in the invitation. That is, the document will come out at this time, you have this time to review, comments are due by this time, and the review slide is due by this time. What I mean by the review slide is the SWOT analysis that we ask folks to do for a color team that summarizes their ideas about how the color team did. Some proposal managers schedule all the reviews at the beginning of the proposal process using the proposal schedule as a guide. So they schedule time for pink team, red team, gold team, white glove, all at the same time. Others wait until each review has been conducted to schedule the next one. Either practice is fine, but recognize that the proposal schedule is likely to shift. So sometimes if you invite folks to the red team and the red team shifts a couple of days, they may or may not have the same time on that new day that they had on the previous schedule. So then you'll have to double check with them to make sure that they have time in the new timeline as opposed to the old timeline. A best practice is to prepare a proposal in brief. Sometimes you don't have time for an in brief meeting. In that case, still prepare and send the in brief with the invitations for the review. You want your reviewers to have as much knowledge as you have about the opportunity. So prepare the in brief deck with inputs from the capture manager, which includes the opportunity overview and the win strategy, and the solution architect about the solution. So generally, there are 3 sections to an in brief: the proposal team members and the assignments to give the reviewers context for who will be on the debrief and who wrote which section, capture manager, capture strategy, solution information to give the reviewers insight into our win themes and our discriminators and what we're trying to say in our proposal, RFP decomposition to explain how the proposal outline has been organized relative to sections L, M, and C, and especially if there's anything weird about the instructions or the evaluation criteria, anything that's sort of non-normative. Your section L has requirements that M doesn't have, M has requirements that L doesn't have, that kind of thing. You want to make sure that they're aware of that as they're reading. Assignments should also be in the deck as well as in the email invitation. And then be sure to provide instructions on how the review will be conducted, whether it's virtual or in person. These days, almost all reviews are conducted virtually, but if you're going to have in-person review where you're going to have everybody sitting around a table, make sure that they're aware that they're going to need to be somewhere as part of the invitation. How long the reviewers will have to review. So what's the deadline for output submissions? When do they have to be done putting in their comments? And when do they have to have that SWOT slide done? And what outputs are you expecting? Are you expecting comments in the document? That's pretty typical. Are you expecting a SWOT or a debrief slide? Again, pretty typical. Sometimes you particularly don't want them to make changes to the content. You want them to only use comments. So make sure that that's very clear in the instructions in the in brief. The thing that you definitely have to include in your invitations is an invitation to the debrief. You want to be sure to have a debrief slide for each section of the proposal for reviewers to use. So have a debrief slide for technical approach, management approach, past performance, resumes, etc. If your technical approach is long or your management approach is long, you may break it up into subsections. It depends on how you've organized your actual review. So make sure that each person who's reviewing has a slide that they can fill out for how they're reviewing the documents. The debrief slides generally ask for a SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. For those who don't know what SWOT means, what's good about the content you reviewed? What needs improvement? Suggestions for how to improve the content. It's really important to ask for the how. If somebody just says this content is bad and they don't tell you why it's bad or how to make it better, then they're not really providing good review information. And then how would you rate the content in total? Generally, we use colors for this: red, yellow, green, blue. This is fairly typical of RFP reviews and sometimes is used by the government as well. So think about using that in your debrief analysis for the reviewers. And be sure to invite the authors to the debrief so they hear the feedback firsthand. And again, coach them to ask questions, but not to challenge the reviewers on what they say. So the next proposal manager's job is directing recovery. After the color team, what do you do next? So the first thing you have to do is adjudicate the comments that you got from the reviewers. You want to conduct a meeting with all of the authors on the review and remind them of the process for adjudicating comments. Different companies do this differently, so it depends on what your company prefers to do, but be sure and tell the authors how you want them to adjudicate comments. Do you want them to resolve the comment, which grays out the comment but doesn't delete it? Do you want them to reply to the comment, but recognize that that sends an email to the reviewer who may or may not respond and who may not or may not wish to be bothered? So think about that. Or do you want them to delete the comment once they've adjudicated it, once they've responded to the comment and put in the corrections or decided that they're not going to respond? All of these are acceptable, but you need to decide on a consistent way of doing things. You can do this in the next stand-up, depending on the extent of the comments or the changes required. If you don't want to have a separate meeting with your authors, that's one way to do it. It just depends on how many changes are going to be needed to be made, and that may not be, you may have too much information to cover in a single stand-up. But what does good recovery look like? It may be necessary to have one-on-one meetings with each author or a particular set of authors to be sure that you're getting the kind of recovery that you want. Be sure to include the capture manager and the solution architect in those meetings as appropriate, particularly if the changes are required that affect either the strategy, because that's the capture manager's job, or the solution itself, because that's the solution architect's job. So, if you're just talking about past performance or resumes, maybe the capture manager and the solution architect don't need to be included. But if you're responding to technical approach, maybe you need to make sure that those folks are invited. But be sure that the author doesn't feel attacked, or we're all just trying to get to a winning proposal. So you may need to get clarification, or you may need to have them switch directions, but make sure that it doesn't feel like what they did was bad or wrong. You want to make sure that they're not going to run for the hills when this meeting is over. You want to coach the author on how to recover their content. What does good look like? And this is particularly critical if you have authors who are new to proposal writing. They may think that they did as good a job as they know how to do, and you may need to coach them on what good proposal writing looks like. And then you need to confirm that the authors are actually doing the recovery and confirm that they're making the content updates in the ways that you discussed when you talked about what recovery should include. If you can do all these things as a proposal manager, then hopefully it all comes together. So as a recap of the objectives of Proposal Management 201, you want to build an outline. It's job number one as a proposal manager is compliance. You want to review the content. Job number two as a proposal manager is making sure your proposal is compelling. And that means reading the content, hopefully reading it along the way so that you can help drive the authors towards that compelling aspect and not just responding to the requirements. Directing the color teams. You'll never get number one and number two right if you don't have effective reviews. So you definitely need to be really good at doing color teams. And the recovery directions are really important. You are the proposal professional. You have done this a million times. Well, okay, maybe not a million, but you've hopefully done this several times. You know what good looks like. You need to make sure that you're guiding and directing and giving people advice on how you get to the right kind of recovery. While it takes a village to get proposals written, it's your job during the RFP stage of proposal development to direct that village. We hope you learned something from this video, and if so, please give us a thumbs up. Also, you can subscribe to the channel and you'll be notified when new videos come out, and maybe you'll learn something from those as well. Thank you for your time. Again, this is Demystifying Proposals.